I've been thinking a lot lately about my relationship with makeup over the years, my preferences and how those have changed over the years, and thinking back to about 10 years ago, just how different my relationship with makeup was. I had a very small little collection and just certain things that I used and a certain look that I was really going for. So in this video today, I wanted to explore that a little bit more and talk about the makeup that I was using about 10 years ago, around the age of 21, 22, 23, and what I would recommend to myself then, knowing what I know now, and with the makeup that is available now, what I would recommend to replace those items that I think are working toward the same makeup goals that I had back then, but with just a little bit better quality and things that I think I would have been happier with. So if that sounds interesting to you, just keep on watching. Before we get into it, if you're new here, welcome. If you like this video, you like my content, I would love for you to consider subscribing. I like to focus mainly on high-end luxury and indie makeup, and I do a combination of reviewing new products and playing with older products that are in my collection. I'm currently doing a no-buy with makeup, so there's going to be a lot less of reviewing new makeup and more of diving into my collection for the time being anyway. So if that sounds good to you, I'd love for you to consider subscribing. So now let's get into the makeup that I used about 10 years ago, the type of look that I was going for with that makeup, and what I would replace those products with now, what I'd recommend to myself back then. So probably my most repurchased makeup product ever was this Physicians Formula powder. I think it's still available. I haven't checked in quite a while, but it was this translucent powder. It was one of their mineral powders. They had a ton of different versions of their mineral powders, but there was one that was in a translucent shade, and it was kind of like a color correcting translucent powder. So it had little swirls of green and peach in there, and it came in a little compact with a brush, and that was what I used every single day. That was my main complexion product. At that time, my main makeup goal was really a no makeup with just very slight enhancements. I mean, there were certain occasions where I would go a little bit heavier on the makeup, but for the vast majority of my time, I was really going for a very subtle, just very slightly enhancing makeup look. And that powder was actually quite good. And I think the main reason I gravitated towards it was because it was light enough for my skin. I had such a hard time finding color matches for my skin. Shade ranges have expanded so much in the last 10 years. And I was only really buying drugstore makeup at that time as well. And so their shade ranges were even smaller than probably what I would have found in Sephora or something like that. So I found that that powder always provided a little tiny bit of coverage, but it was quite undetectable. It was a pretty good shade for me, and it worked really well. If I ever needed a little bit more coverage, I would use a concealer, but I didn't have a specific go-to concealer that I would purchase again and again. I would just kind of go with what was on sale, maybe what looked like it had a decent shade for me. So I can't even remember any specific concealer that I used. But when I did use concealer, it was very sparingly, only on blemishes. I never applied concealer under my eyes or anything like that. So for the powder and the concealer, what I would recommend to myself now would be the Kosas Cloud Set powder. It's a nice multi-purpose powder, so it does provide a tiny bit of coverage on its own, probably a similar amount to what I would have gotten with that Physicians Formula one. It's a good shade, it's really nice and neutral, so I think it has the ability to cancel out some of the redness that I would be wanting to cover. And it's pretty lightweight and quite undetectable on the skin. And I think it actually has a lot of similarities in just the texture and how it works on the skin to that Physicians Formula one. For concealer, I've been going in between the Hourglass Vanish concealer in the shade Birch. I also sometimes played around with green color correctors at the time. I think there was a concealer that I had that was like double-ended, so one end was a normal skin tone and then the other end was a green color corrector. And I liked the idea of the green color corrector more than I was able to really make it work for myself. I just could never quite figure out how to make that work for covering up pimples. So I think the Hourglass one is very good at that. And I think the shade is also really nice because it has a really neutral tone and there is a little bit of a kind of green undertone in this, which I think also helps it to cancel out redness that's in pimples and so on. But it's also a natural enough looking skin tone that it matches really nicely if I wanted to use it more as an overall product, if I were going for a little bit of more coverage if I wanted to. But then another one that I thought of would be the Monika Blundercover, which would go more toward my goals of the no makeup kind of very undetectable look, and I think would pair really well with the Kosas Cloud Set powder. So if I could recommend 3 complexion products, it would be the Kosas powder, the Hourglass concealer, and the Monika Blundercover, because I think the Monika Blunder has a different enough kind of purpose and application from the Hourglass to make it worth having both of them. But it would just depend on whether I wanted to go for something that would be a little bit more bulletproof in terms of coverage and long lasting, or something that I would be happy with seeing just fade kind of naturally and gradually throughout the day with the Monika Blunder. Now at that time when I was around 21, 22, I was very intent on trying to find a lip stain that would be a very natural kind of mid-tone nude color on my skin, but that would again be quite undetectable, so it wouldn't really have any discernible finish. It would just be a very skin-like finish on the lips and would be a stain so that it would last a really long time. What I used back then was a CoverGirl, I think it was an Outlast stain. I'll try to find a picture of it. The format of it was kind of like a little felt tip marker. So my issue with that was that it didn't actually last very long on my lips. It was a little bit drying, as most lip stains are, but I really did like the color. And so I went through quite a few of those as well. These days, knowing what I know now, I still haven't really found a lip stain that checks all of those boxes. So I would probably actually recommend a lipstick, but one that has the ability to stain the lips and still has a really natural finish and is still in that kind of shade range of the mid-toned nude type shade. That would just be an enhancing color on my lips, but a little bit darker and richer than my natural lip color. I also had one lipstick, I believe it was a L'Oreal lipstick. I think the shade was Spiced Cinnamon or something along those lines. Again, I'll try to find that online and put a picture of it up here and confirm the name. But it was a similar type of color, but a little bit deeper, so a little bit of a slightly more vampy kind of nude, reddish, brownish color. And I did wear that sometimes. Usually, again, I would just try to apply it as a stain though, just apply it very lightly and kind of blend it out on my lips. And then there was another lipstick in that same range from L'Oreal, which I think was called Everbloom Kiss. And it was actually a color kind of similar to my top today and kind of similar to my lips today as well. And it was one that I didn't wear very often, but it was a color that I was just so attracted to that I had to buy the lipstick. But I always had a little bit of an issue with kind of getting that color to work for me. So with all of that in mind, I've actually pulled 4 lipsticks here. I don't know if I would recommend all of them, but at least 2 of them to kind of fill both of those color needs. They're all Lisa Eldridge Luxuriously Lucent lipsticks. This is my favorite lip formula, and I think it's really great because it does have the ability to be applied very, very lightly and sheerly and kind of stains the lips a little bit, or you can build it up if you want more impact. And it also wears really beautifully throughout the day, so if you don't have an opportunity to touch it up or reapply, that's fine. But it's also really nice and balmy and moisturizing, so if you do want to reapply it, that's really easy to do as well. So I think this would be definitely the formula that I would recommend for myself. And for the kind of deeper mid-tone nude, slightly more vampy color, I would go for Spirited Away. That was my first thought. And or Painterly. So Spirited Away, I think, would be probably my number 1 suggestion because it is actually just that kind of perfect enhancing color. It has a little bit more going on than my natural lip color, a little bit of a reddishness, a little bit of a kind of browny, earthy quality, and just a perfect everyday color for what I was looking for back then. And Painterly is very similar. It's just a little bit more cool toned and has a little bit more mauve in it. So that would probably be closer to the actual lipstick color, whereas Spirited Away would be closer to the lip stain color that I used so often. So both of those I think would be fantastic options. I would probably go through many bullets of both of those lipsticks. And then for that kind of more peachy, coral, everbloom type color, I pulled out Je ne sais quoi and Kitten Mischief. So Kitten Mischief is my all-time favorite lipstick color, but it's not quite as vibrant as that everbloom color that I was so into, but it actually suits me more because of that. So that one is Kitten Mischief. And I just know that that one works so well with my coloring. It works well with any kind of makeup look or no makeup at all. So I would definitely recommend that to myself. But then Je ne sais quoi is actually one that is closer to that L'Oreal lipstick color that I was into. It's quite similar and still manages to be a little bit more wearable. It has a slightly muted quality while still being really bright and fun. So either or both of those I would also recommend to myself. If I had to just choose two, I would do Spirited Away and Kitten Mischief, knowing what I know now, knowing that I can wear those colors just so easily. And I've wiped them off and you can see they do leave a little bit of a stain. I never wore bronzer back then. I don't think I even knew what it was. So I don't have a bronzer suggestion for myself. And the same with highlighter. It just wasn't a thing back then, at least not in my world. But blush definitely was, and I had one blush. It was a Revlon cream blush. I don't think they make it anymore. I have looked for it. And it was in a very, very bright kind of hot pink color, but it was a nice formula actually. It was kind of more like a cream to powder, and I was able to adjust the coverage so I could apply it very, very sheerly or build it up a bit if I wanted to. I don't have a cream blush really that's very similar to that, but the feeling of it is actually quite similar to this Dior Rosy Glow. This is a lighter color and probably actually a little bit more purpley than that Revlon blush, but I think the end result would be about the same with these two blushes. This is one that I find really easy to use. It actually does work really nicely on its own on my skin tone, but it also works well to enhance and kind of counteract warmer blush colors as well. So I forgot to mention with the lipsticks, when I was using those lip stains and those lipsticks back then, I would use those as cream blushes too quite often. And I would do the same with these Lisa Eldridge lipsticks. So I would have some variety of options in blushes with those lipstick shades as well. But for that really vibrant, cool toned blush, I would go with the Dior Backstage Rosy Glow Blush. Even though it's a powder, it has a really thin texture and looks very natural on the skin. Now I know I said that the Physicians Formula powder is probably my most repurchased makeup product, but that could be tied or even surpassed by the eyeliner that I used to use. It was again a CoverGirl product, a twist up eyeliner in the shade Gray Khaki. That was my absolute go-to liner. I used that every single day. It was a perfect shade for me to do a really subtle no makeup look. It suited my skin tone really nicely and I could apply it just very, very tight along my lash line. I would also use it as a brow pencil very lightly to fill in any kind of sparse areas in my brows. It was a perfect color for me. My issue with it was that I would go through them so quickly and it wasn't very long lasting either, so it would inevitably fade within a few hours. What I would replace it with today would be a Victoria Beckham liner. These are my favorite liners. And I would specifically go for the shade Sequin Green because I think it is the most similar to that Gray Khaki shade that I loved so much and would do basically the same thing. So even though it's a sequin color, which means it has little shimmery particles in it, it's not overly shimmery and it still has the ability to give that really, really light definition and look really flattering on my personal skin tone and my eye color. And it's even neutral enough that I think I could get away with it in my brows as well. And I find these to be much longer lasting, both in terms of the time it takes to use up the product, as well as how long it wears on the skin throughout the day. Now, the most difficult time I've had coming up with a product to replace what I used back then was with the eyeshadow palette. Again, I had only one eyeshadow palette at that time, and it was this small little round palette from Joe Fresh, which is a Canadian brand associated with the Loblaws or Superstore. It's their kind of store makeup and clothing brand, and it was this little circular eyeshadow palette with 3 shades in it. It had a kind of light olivey khaki green, it had a kind of mid-toned rosy pink color, and it had a deeper cool toned brown color. And that was it, and that was the only eyeshadow I used at that time. Most of the time I wasn't using eyeshadow at all, but if I was using that palette. And mostly I think the khaki shade and sometimes the dark brown shade. I didn't use the rosy shade as much, but it was still one that I did get a little bit of use out of and that I was really happy to have. So looking at my eyeshadow palettes these days, I don't really have anything that combines all three of those except for the Natasha Denona Retro Glam, which I was kind of surprised to find that that was the one because it has so many of those sagey greens, which are not at all like what was in that palette, but it does have a couple of really nice options for kind of more neutral shades with green khaki undertones rather than being really straight up green colors. So it has this one here, it has this one, which is a slightly kind of darker version of that same color. It has the shimmer in that same type of khaki green undertoned color, and it also has the rosy colors. So this one here, this one, and that one, which I would have wanted, and it also has a really nice, very deep, kind of cool toned, slightly green undertoned brown. So this is the one palette that I could find that I have that actually had all the colors that I would be looking for. Another possibility would be the Hindash Monochromance palette, because it also has these kind of slightly green undertoned browns. It also gives you a little bit more option with the lighter toned nude colors. Has some rosiness here. I would probably mix those two colors to create the type of rosy color that I was looking for. It has a little bit of depth here, so I think that's kind of the one thing it's lacking, is an even deeper brown that I could use for liner, but I think this would do pretty well too. And then the last thing that I would use was mascara. I didn't use it all the time. I kind of went through phases of using it every day, and then there would be times that I would go weeks without using it. Just depended on the kind of look I liked at the moment. The mascara that I used over and over again was one of the CoverGirl Lash Blast mascaras. What I liked about it was that it was very easy to use and I could get quite a natural lash look with it, but I could also build it up if I wanted a little bit more drama, which was rarely, but it was still an option. I think today, if I were to suggest a mascara to replace that, it would probably be the Lancôme Lash Idole mascara. That's really one of my favorites. I think it really fills a lot of the same needs that the CoverGirl one filled. It can give a very natural look. You can just apply one very light layer, and it does a good job of kind of separating the lashes and just defining them, adding a little touch of volume, a little touch of length, but not too much if you just apply one coat. But you can also build it up to get quite a dramatic look, and I just think it's a really good quality mascara, so that would have been my suggestion. So that was all the makeup that I used when I was 21, 22, 23, about 10 years ago, and what I would replace it with today or suggest to myself back then, knowing what I know now. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have any questions or comments below. I would love to do another one of these if you're interested in seeing going back to when I was about 13, 14, 15 because I had a different kind of makeup regimen and different goals back then as well. So it would be fun to go back and look at what I was using then and what I would replace it with now. So let me know if you'd be interested in seeing that as well. If you'd like to see more from me and you haven't subscribed to my channel already, I'd love for you to do so. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in my next video.